Okay, let's dive into this. We've got the transcript here from the Angular v20 developer event that happened earlier this year.
Yep, our source material.
Exactly. And we're going to use it to, unpack what the Angular team is really focusing on: developer experience, performance, tooling, all that good stuff.
Right, straight from the horse's mouth, basically. We want to pull out the key updates, the things you really need to know about v20.
And, it feels like Angular's been on such a transformation lately. The last couple of years, big foundational changes.
Totally. Reactivity with signals, moving towards zoneless apps. It's a different framework in many ways.
And the transcript actually mentions their process, this sort of three-phase thing they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, like pioneer an early version, then do a deep dive, kind of like what we're doing, getting feedback.
Right from the community, from you listening.
Exactly. And then phase 3 is refine, make it stable, make it impactful.
Okay, so v20 is kind of that third phase, payoff, polishing up the big features.
That's the feeling I get. Taking stuff that was maybe in preview and making it production ready, graduating APIs to stable, moving new things into preview.
Makes sense. And they give a shout out to the community early on too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Right up front, feedback, PRs, just people building cool stuff. They emphasize how vital that is.
As they should. Okay, so where do we start? Foundation, reactivity.
Let's start there. Reactivity. The transcript highlights some key APIs hitting stable in v20. Ready for prime time?
Like what?
Effect for side effects reacting to signals, link signal, that utility for connecting older patterns, and route level render mode.
Okay, route level render mode stable, that's significant for performance tuning.
Yeah, fine-grained control per route.
Right.
And those signal APIs graduating, that signals, maturity for the whole signal system.
For sure. But the really big buzz, I think, is zoneless hitting developer preview.
Zoneless. Right. We knew it was coming. So the source material, what does it say is the why? What problem is Zone.js causing?
Well, the way the transcript explains it, Zone.js patches a bunch of browser APIs, things like set timeout, add event listener, even promises.
Okay.
So whenever any of those patched things happen, Zone.js pokes Angular and says, hey, something happened, which often triggers change detection everywhere.
Even if the thing that happened has nothing to do with the part of the UI that needs updating.
Exactly. It's kind of like a blanket notification system. Can lead to a lot of unnecessary checks.
So Zoneless gets rid of that blanket.
Pretty much. No Zone.js means Angular isn't getting kinged constantly for every little async thing. The benefits they list are, pretty compelling.
Like better performance.
Yeah, improved performance is the big one. Okay. Less unnecessary work, but also better debugging because changes are more explicit. Better compatibility with other libraries that maybe don't like Zone.js patching everything.
Right.
And even a smaller bundle size because you just don't ship Zone.js anymore.
Okay, but if Angular isn't getting poked by Zone.js, how does it know when to update the view?
That's where signals really come into play. The transcript explicitly calls out zoneless plus signals as a powerful combo.
Right, signals carry the state.
Exactly. Change detection becomes much more targeted. You might use Mark IV check sometimes, but mostly you rely on signals. When a signal changes, only the components actually using that signal get notified that they might need an update. It's way more precise.
That sounds like a mental shift in how you approach state end updates.
It is, definitely. But the way to try it seems straightforward, based on the transcript. Update to v20, add provide zoneless change detection to your app config,
and uninstall Zone.js.
Yep. Seems like they want people experimenting.
Okay, sticking with reactivity, there's this new thing called the Resource API.
Yeah, this one sounds really interesting. They call it a new primitive.
Primitive for what? Handling async stuff.
Basically, yeah. Think about fetching data. Usually you have like loading states, error states, the actual data. You manage all that, maybe with RxJS observables in a service.
Lots of boilerplate sometimes.
Right. So the Resource API lets you declare an async dependency, say, an HTTP call, and it exposes its status, like loading, error, value, as signals.
Oh, so you just bind to those signals directly in your template.
Exactly. Or use them in computed signals or effects. It integrates asynchronous operations right into the signal graph. Much cleaner.
So no more manually managing iLoading flags in the component.
That's the idea. And they mention an experimental HTTP resource built using this. It uses the standard Angular HTTP client, so interceptors and mocking still work.
Okay.
But it gives you this reactive signal interface. And they even mention it supports streaming values.
Streaming? Like for server-sent events or something?
Yeah, potentially. Imagine streaming updates directly into a signal. That's pretty powerful. The transcript says developers are really liking this one.
I can see why. It simplifies a super common pattern. Any other signal stuff getting stabilized?
Yeah, after next render and after render effect hooks are stable now too. And they kind of teased a future signal-based forms system.
Ooh, forms are always complex. What's the goal there?
Sounds like unifying template-driven and reactive forms into something more scalable and dev-friendly, built on signals, but keeping compatibility. Early days, though.
Okay. And looking even further ahead, anything mentioned?
Yeah, a sort of general direction making Angular easier for newcomers while still powerful for huge apps. Things like maybe selectorless components being more streamlined, better bootstrapping, faster builds, more performance gains later this year.
Good stuff. Okay, let's shift gears. Developer experience, DX. The transcript says, you need a good DX to build apps users love.
Makes perfect sense. And one specific DX win they detailed is around host binding and host listener.
Right. What was the problem there?
The issue mentioned was type checking. If you use dynamic expressions like host.aria.aria label, the sum value part wasn't type checked properly.
So you could have a typo or the wrong type, and you wouldn't know until runtime.
Exactly. Boom, error in the console. Super annoying. So v20 adds proper type checking for those host properties and the decorators. Errors now show up while you're coding in your editor.
That is a huge quality of life improvement, seriously.
Oh, totally. And the language service support is better too. Syntax highlighting, go to definition, renaming, all working within those host bindings now.
Nice. How do you turn that on?
There's a flag in your project settings, type check host bindings, you just enable it.
Got it. What else for DX? Dynamic components.
Yeah, dynamic component creation APIs got an upgrade. Creating components on the fly, it worked, but setting inputs or listening to outputs afterward felt a bit manual.
Okay, yeah.
So the v20 way gives you a new API to declare the inputs and outputs right when you create the component.
Okay. More declarative.
Exactly. Feels more like template binding. The framework handles hooking it all up using the same efficient mechanism.
That's much cleaner.
And get this, you can also apply directives to dynamically created components and bind to those directives inputs using the same API.
Whoa, really? So create component, add directive, bind directive input, all in one go.
Yep. Pretty slick for complex dynamic scenarios.
That's actually really powerful.
And these new APIs are tree shakeable, which is always good. They hinted this pattern might show up elsewhere too, maybe test bed, maybe host directives. Consistency is good.
Definitely. Any other quick DX wins mentioned for v20?
Let's see. Support for TypeScript 5.8, support for untagged template, literal expressions in templates.
What does that mean, untagged?
Just means if you have a simple template string, like a component, you don't need any special tagging if it doesn't have variables. Minor, but nice.
Okay.
Also, template HMR is on by default now. Faster feedback loop during dev, and a new schematic to clean up unused imports. Little things, but they add up.
Yeah, those paper cuts can be annoying. Okay, performance. Always a hot topic. They mentioned past stuff like SSR and hydration in v16.
Right, those were the groundwork. v20 brings incremental hydration to stable. It was in dev preview in v19.
Incremental hydration. Okay, goal is faster loading apps, better user experience. How does it work differently from full hydration?
So instead of the whole app needing to download and hydrate before it's interactive, Incremental lets you choose parts of the template to delay. You use the defer block.
Defer loading and hydrating certain sections.
Exactly. The framework hydrates the critical stuff first, the stuff the user sees immediately. Then the deferred blocks load and hydrate later, maybe on idle, or when the user scrolls them into view, or based on some condition.
So you'd use triggers like hydrate on idle or hydrate when?
Yep. Hydrate on, hydrate when, even hydrate never for static bits. The idea is you get a faster time to interactive, smaller initial bundle, but the user eventually gets the full interactive experience.
That sounds like a really practical tool for optimization.
Yeah, it gives you fine-grained control. And they point to a guide on angular.dev for the details.
Cool. And related to performance, the root-level render mode APIs are also stable now.
Correct. Also previewed in v19, stable in v20.
And this gives you control over how routes are rendered. Server, static, client.
Precisely. Per route, you decide. Server rendered for SEO maybe, statically generated for a blog page, client rendered for a complex dashboard section, all in the same app.
That flexibility seems huge for optimizing different parts of an application appropriately.
Yeah, the transcript mentions benefits like better performance, SEO, flexibility, built-in I18 support, and good dev server integration. It's about choosing the right tool for each job.
Makes sense. Okay, let's switch to tooling and infrastructure. Testing is a big one, especially with Karma being deprecated.
Yeah, the team's been looking for alternatives. The transcript mentions their goals for a replacement.
Sure.
A good migration path, strong community support, and just a better developer experience than, the old setup.
Okay, so what are the options in v20? Are they experimental?
They are. V20 offers experimental support for 3 different paths you can try.
3. Okay, what are they?
First, node testing using Angular's experimental support for JJs, known for being fast in Node.
Okay, J for node tests.
Second, for browser testing needs, there's experimental support for Web Test Runner.
Web Test Runner for browser. Got it.
And third, new in v20 is experimental support for vtest.
vtest. I've heard good things about that one.
Yeah, it's interesting because vtest can run tests in both Node and browser environments, potentially offering a single solution.
So J, Web Test Runner, and vtest. How are they going to pick one or decide the path forward?
They're really leaning on the community here. The transcript is clear. Try them out. Try J, try Web Test Runner, try vtest. Give feedback.
So our feedback directly influences the final decision.
That's the message. They'll use that community input to figure out which one or maybe which combination makes sense to stabilize.
Okay, clear call to action for anyone doing testing. Beyond that, Chrome DevTools integration.
Yeah, this is cool. A partnership with the Chrome team. The problem they identified is that the standard performance flame chart in DevTools shows everything. It's hard to see your app code versus framework code versus third-party stuff.
Right, it's just a see a function call sometimes.
Exactly. So the solution is a new custom track within the Chrome DevTools Performance tab, specifically for Angular.
Oh, neat. What does it show?
It surfaces profiling data relevant to Angular, it helps you distinguish activity in your components versus Angular's internals. Makes it way easier to spot bottlenecks in your own code.
That sounds incredibly useful. How do you use it?
You need Angular v20 and Chrome 136 or newer. Then just open the Performance tab, record a profile, and you should see a dedicated Angular track there.
Fantastic. Direct integration with browser tools is always welcome. What about the Angular DevTools extension itself?
That's getting updates too. There's experimental support for router visualization.
Visualizing the router state, like a graph.
Sounds like it. They position it as a sneak peek of adding more runtime insights into the DevTools. You can enable it in the extension's settings toggle enable router graph. Again, they want feedback on this.
Okay. And build system changes. Something about Webpack.
Yeah, they removed Webpack as a direct dependency when you run bringing.
What's the impact of that?
Streamlining. It simplifies the default build setup and cuts down on the number of dependencies needed for a basic new app. The transcript mentioned a 40% reduction in dependencies.
Now, 40% is a lot less stuff to install just to get started.
Yep, less baggage. Finally, on the infrastructure front, security. They partnered with Google's security team.
Right. What came out of that?
Support for generating content security policies, or CSPs, automatically in production builds. They call it AutoCSP.
AutoCSP, how does it work?
You add AutoCSP.true to your build configuration in angular.json for production. When you build, Angular analyzes your app and generates a suitable CSP header.
And what does a CSP actually do?
It's a security measure browsers understand. It tells the browser which sources are allowed to load scripts, styles, images, etc. This helps block things like cross-site scripting, XSS attacks, where malicious scripts might get injected.
So it hardens the application.
Exactly. The source is careful to say it's not a magic bullet, but it's a good way to add a layer of protection. They mentioned keeping an eye on the blog for more details on the security work.
Good to know. Okay, last major topic area, AI. Feels like everyone's talking about AI. What's Angular's angle here?
Well, they acknowledge AI is changing development, and it's still early days. Their focus seems twofold.
Which is?
1, helping developers build AI-powered features into their Angular apps. 2, helping developers use AI tools in their development workflow.
Makes sense. How are they supporting that?
They launched a new section on the website, angular.dev AI.
A dedicated AI hub.
Yeah. It's meant to be a resource hub guidance, best practices, starter projects, code recipes, that kind of thing.
Any specific examples mentioned?
Yeah, they highlighted a recipe for streaming responses from an LLM, to get that live typing effect you see in chatbots.
Oh, cool.
And interestingly, the snippet they showed apparently uses the new resource API we talked about earlier to handle the streaming data reactively.
Nice tie-in. Connecting the new primitives to modern use cases.
Exactly. They also mentioned doing longer dev sessions showing how to integrate with specific tools like Vertex AI, Firebase, GenKit, mostly Google's offerings. But they stress that the guidance aims to be broadly applicable too.
So practical help for getting started with AI in an Angular context.
Seems to be the goal. Provide pathways for the community.
Okay, wow. That's a lot packed into v20. It feels like a really substantial release.
It does. You've got core reactive stuff stabilizing, major performance features like incremental hydration and route rendering modes going stable.
Plus, the developer experience tweaks, the tooling updates with testing and DevTools, the security focus with AutoCSP.
And now this new push into AI resources, it really feels like they're solidifying the foundation while also looking ahead. The message seems to be about shipping apps with confidence, building things users love.
So the call to action is pretty clear then.
Yeah. Check out angular.dev, update to v20, try out the new features, especially the experimental ones, and give that feedback.
Definitely. So as we wrap up, maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. How does all this fit together?
Right. How will this combination, the solid reactive primitives like Signal and the Resource API, these powerful performance tools like incremental hydration, the DX improvements, and these new AI resources, how will that fundamentally change how you approach building your next web application? Something to chew on.